Hi, everyone. I'll just make a little noise so you can double check your audio is working while we let everybody into the webinar. Glad you could all join us today. We're expecting a few more attendees. I'm just going to give it one more minute in case there are folks who are running a little behind, filling their teacup. All right, well, I'm going to get us started. My name is Dusty Krickow. I serve as the committee chair for the Education Committee for CWR. I know we have quite a few guests with us today who are representing different roles and are new to CWR, so I just want to extend a special welcome to justice promoters, Laudato Si coordinators, whoever else may be joining us on this webinar. Thanks for being here today. A couple of administrative webinar operations things so that you know what's happening. If you're familiar with Zoom meetings but haven't been on a webinar in a while, just a reminder that there's no grid of faces when you're on a webinar. There are 44 people here, but you'll only see the panelists participating. And then, but you can still ask questions. We encourage you to use the webinar chat, or if you click on the little Q&A button on the bottom row of your menu, you'll be able to send in questions that way. If a question is relevant in time, we may interrupt the conversation, but for the most part, we'll probably wait for different pause points in the presentation to respond to your questions, but rest assured we do see them. I do want to take a moment to have you look in your chat section and just double check the drop-down box where you type your messages in. It may be set to hosts and panelists right now, which would mean that only the three of us on screen would be able to see your chats. If you want to change that to everyone, there will be a couple times when we'll be inviting you to put messages in, and we would really like it if everybody who is attending can see them. If there are any unanswered questions at the end of the webinar today, rest assured that our presenters are available for follow-ups via email. We'll be providing contact information at the end. And then you'll also note that the session is being recorded. This allows us to make it available for you after the fact on the CWR's website. That way, in case you need to duck out or want to recapture something, you do have the option to do so. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Anna Johnson, who is the North American Senior Programs Manager for the Laudato Si Movement, and I'll let her take it from here.
Thank you so much, Dusty. It is an honor to be with you all today. Thank you so much for this time and this ability to talk about Laudato Si and the season of creation and this amazing moment that's coming up in front of all of us. So, but before we start too much, we thought we would open in prayer. And so there is a season of creation prayer that it will be prayed by all Christians worldwide in their own languages as the season is undertaken. And so Dusty and I thought it would be great to start with that here today. So before doing, I invite you to take a moment to take a deep breath, to arrive in this place, knowing that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, God is also here, even if it is on Zoom, on a webinar format. I'll pass it over to Steve.
Creator of all, from your communion of love, life sprung forth like a mighty river, and the whole cosmos came into being.
On this earth of overflowing love, the Word was made flesh and went forth with the life-giving waters, proclaiming peace and justice for all creation.
You called human beings to till and keep your garden. You placed us in right relationship with each creature, but we failed to listen to the cries of the earth and the cries of the most vulnerable. We broke with the flowing communion of love and sinned against you by not safeguarding the conditions for life.
We lament the loss of our fellow species and their habitats. We grieve the loss of human cultures, along with the lives and livelihoods that have been displaced or perished, and we ache at the sight of an economy of death, war, and violence that we have inflicted on ourselves and on the earth.
Open our ears to your creative, reconciling, and sustaining word that calls us through the book of Scripture and the book of creation. Bless us once again with your life-giving waters so that the Creator Spirit may let justice and peace flow in our hearts and overflow into all creation.
Open our hearts to receive the living waters of God's justice and peace, and to share it with our suffering sisters and brothers, all creatures around us, and all creation.
Bless us to walk together with all people of goodwill, so that the many streams of the living waters of God's justice and peace may become a mighty river all over the earth. In the name of the one who came to proclaim good news to all creation, Jesus Christ. Amen.
And we invite you now to take a moment to think about a place of Christ's living water for you. Where is a river, a stream, an ocean, a lake, or other place of water that reminds you of God's abundance? We invite you to put the name of that body of water into the chat for everyone to see. Seeing the Hudson River, Lake Erie, Neshoba Pond, Lake Madison, both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, Lake Winnebago, Cazenovia Lake, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, Lake Michigan. Oh, look, they're coming in so fast now. This is so great. As they continue to come in, we pray for all of these places and the many, many bodies of water around the world that carry your messages of love, justice, and peace. Our God, we pray. Amen. Oh, this is wonderful. Look at all these waters that connect us. This is wonderful. So thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here to share with you the image and logo for the season of creation this year. So the theme of this season of creation that is shared ecumenically is Let Justice and Peace Flow, taking its inspiration from Amos 5:24. And there's this beautiful graphic, I think, that helps us to really see this place of convergence, this place of power, also this place of destruction that we find ourselves currently in as we are facing the ecological realities around us. The Laudato Si Movement, who I work for, is a movement that was founded in 2015, which for those of you who are well-versed in the encyclical history, know that that's also the year that Pope Francis released the encyclical Laudato Si, a wonderful writing and teaching of our church that talks about the importance of caring for creation, how deeply rooted it is within our faith. It's not this newfangled thing that's just coming out. And our call to respond and really lifting up the challenges that are in front of us around that. The Laudato Si movement was organized then to help mobilize the world's Catholics to care for our common home through ecological conversion, spirituality, eco-spirituality, through living in a sustainable way, as well as through prophetic advocacy to systems and structures. And these are all outlined in the document Laudato Si as well. I think right now, in the middle of August, just coming out of July, which scientists are saying is the hottest month in recorded history, it is perhaps becoming all the more clear why the season of creation is coming upon us at such a needed time, and why it is important for us to move forward and really activating our communities to respond to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor that is in front of us. We have seen, as I said, these record-breaking temperatures, even in the global south, in the middle of winter. I had a call with my colleague who's in the Philippines, and she was wearing a tank top and saying that she was sweating. We've had the Canadian wildfires, which, looking at where these water sources are, I imagine many of you have been impacted by the smoke coming across the country, and the Alaskan floods that just happened last week, and the heat waves across so much of this land. And so now, on sort of the flip side of these living waters, I'm wondering if people might be willing to put into the chat, what climate impacts are you seeing in your local place? What are you experiencing right now? Seeing flooding, heat, absolutely. Wildfire smoke, heat, flooding, air quality, drought, a very wet July, tornadoes, heat, smoke, heavier rainstorms, air quality, heat repeated. Absolutely. And as these continue to come in quickly, I think many of us are becoming more and more aware of the connections of these impacts to climate change. And I would say that sisters have been the four leading voices around this in our faith in a beautiful way. So first of all, thank you for all of the work that you have done that has made my work more possible, because you've been laying the ground and talking about this for so long. I'm curious now, from your knowledge and experience, what's contributing to the root causes of these changes in weather patterns and these impacts that we're living in? What is causing this? Put a word or two or a sentence into the chat. People. Thanks, Christy. Yeah, climate change, fossil fuels, emissions, poor choices, ozone, consumerism. Yes. You all are making these connections. You all are seeing this. Human beings and industrialization, lack of compassion for soil, all of the above. Thank you, Anne. Yes. So this is the situation we find ourselves in. This is this unique moment in history where we find ourselves, that through the Industrial Revolution, and Pope Francis outlines this so beautifully in Laudato Si, through the Industrial Revolution, as well as this continuing movement, we have seen the ways that we have continued to live out of right relationship with creation, through consumerism, through the expansion of use of fossil fuels, and so much more. So thank you so much for putting these into the chat. I think an important part as we talk about this, here are some images of some things that are happening across our country, from the wildfires to the heat, the cracked soil, and the flooding. An important thing to talk about as we think about all of this is our emotions and the emotions that are connected to this, and knowing that this is a communications piece of how we talk about this, right? Because I know even in the course of just seeing everything that has come across the chat in the last 10 minutes of this call has unleashed all sorts of emotions within me, and I imagine for you as well. And so as you see these last two questions come through the chat, the impacts that your fellow webinar attendees are experiencing and the reasons why, what sort of emotions are coming up for you? How does it impact you emotionally to read these things? And here's an emotions wheel. So I used to tutor refugee students, and we would use this emotions wheel every day to talk about what emotion are you coming at from today? Fear, sad and angry, frustration, scared, anxiety. Absolutely. Angry and scared. Anger, sad, scared, angry. Sad, scared, angry, helpless. It is astonishing how this situation in which we find ourselves has an opportunity to connect us across all these little Zoom screens that we're on and all these places, right? To say, we can take a moment and say, all of us sitting on the Zoom call today, wherever we're calling in from, there's so much similarity between this anxiety, this anger, this fear, frustration, all these sort of, bottom the bottom half of this circle as we think about how this reality that we're facing is in front of us. And I saw one motivated, which is a beautiful response. So thank you for that. The ecological crisis that we are facing is at its heart a spiritual crisis. Pope Francis says this in Laudato Si. In fact, a lot of spiritual writers will talk about this. So there's talk about Thich Nhat Hanh has said similar things. You know, across religions, there has been a similar conversation around how the ecological crisis is at its heart a spiritual crisis. We are experiencing a spiritual crisis as a society, and which has its deep connections to why we are in the place that we are in. So any answer that we seek, any response we put effort into must therefore be a spiritual answer. We are, as was named earlier, we are consuming more than our planet has the capacity to support. Consumption, our urgency, our sense of speed are driving the ways in which we are reaping destruction upon this planet. In order to adequately face this challenge in front of us, this challenge of our very day, so many people will say, this is the challenge. This is the challenge we were born to respond to. This is the time we were born into. We have to have a conversion to an entirely new way of being. We have to come to understand ourselves in a different way. And so what does our faith have to offer to this situation? Why should faith be involved in moving forward? And I know that so much of my understanding of this has been inspired by the writings of so many Catholic sisters. And so I know that many people on this webinar already have the wisdom to respond to this question. So we're just going to be talking through it a little bit more. And we posit, largely based off of sisters' writings, that we as Catholics have a unique ability to respond to this need. We as people of faith, whether it be Catholics or Christians or even broader, we understand the language of conversion. We understand the language of emptying ourselves, this kenosis, this sense of bringing a different reality, a sense of global solidarity, subsidiarity, right? Our Catholic social teaching tenets. So much of this is rooted in this. And so part of this is, as we think about this river of justice and peace, that this entails this bigger heart conversion of what does this conversion that we're calling for look like. As Laudato Si reminds us, ecological conversion, quote, entails a loving awareness that we are not disconnected from the rest of creatures, but rather joined in a splendid universal communion. What a beautiful image. Nonviolence and this call to justice and living in a peaceful way is a process for nurturing such an ecological conversion, because nonviolence is about nurturing right relationships among humans and between humans and the rest of the natural world, moving from the old way of domination and exploitation towards what Laudato Si calls a civilization of love. What a beautiful image, a civilization of love. Ecological conversion and conversion to nonviolence are intrinsically interconnected. And so why the season of creation? Why is this an essential moment, like such a powerful moment for us to be in, to say, how can we respond to these crises, to this sense of helplessness and anxiety and fear? What do we have to respond to, and how does the structure of our faiths help us when sometimes it hinders, but sometimes it's very helpful. Sometimes there are things in place that can really help us to respond on a global scale. And so we have this season of creation. The idea around this was started in 1989 when Ecumenical Patriarch Demetros I proclaimed September 1st as the Orthodox Day of Prayer for Creation. Then after that, the World Council of Churches extended the season for a month to say we'll start September 1st and we'll end October 4th on the feast day of someone very important. Wonder if somebody can put it into the chat. Does anyone know whose feast day is October 4th? Hint, he has, yeah, I was gonna say, spoiler alert, he has the same name as our Pope. Oh, Dominic too, I didn't know that. So thanks for that insight. And in 2015, Pope Francis made it official for the Catholic Church as well. He said, quote, "The annual World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation will offer individual believers and communities a fitting opportunity to reaffirm their personal vocation to be stewards of creation, to thank God for the wonderful handiwork which has been entrusted to us, our care, and to implore God's help for the protection of creation, as well as God's pardon for the sins committed against the world in which we live. The celebration of this day on the same date as the Orthodox Church will be a valuable opportunity to bear witness to our growing communion with our Orthodox sisters and brothers." The season then starts September 1st, the Day of Prayer for Creation, and ends the 4th of October on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, who is the patron saint of ecology, beloved by many Christian denominations. And throughout the month-long celebration, slightly longer than month-long celebration, the world's 2.2 billion Christians come together to care for our common home. Now, when we talk about helplessness, sometimes, I feel like, I work on my computer virtually, and I'm just sitting like in this corner of my room, like thinking about this and being concerned about it. And sometimes I can feel alone. But to know that I am part of, in a season, like part of 2.2 billion people who are in some way or another praying for creation through our shared Christianity, I think is just incredibly powerful. And so the goals are to unite the Christian community in praying and acting for our common home, and to take time to glorify in creation, to sit with and ask forgiveness for the harm we have caused, or quote, our sins against creation. So this is a very powerful season that has been built out and is recognized by all these Christian leaders across the world. And there's a power in saying, how can we be responding to this perceived sense of helplessness with the power, with the numbers that our faith has to offer, as well as with the incredible wisdom that spiritual responses have to offer, being a spiritual response. Oh, and here's a picture of Pope Francis with one of the current Orthodox patriarchs. And so thinking about how all of us around the world are helping to care for our common home during this time, whether that be on a sort of an individual level of watering the rainforest of the Amazon, or planting, things like that, as well as, thinking about structural change and how are we calling for advocacy? How are we calling to create the systems and structures that help our world to flourish? And so what sort of resources do we have for you in doing this? So there is the Season of Creation website, which hopefully many of you have seen, and we'll put into the chat as well. On this website, you can sign up to receive the latest resources and news. And as you sign up for this, you'll get the emails that come out around it, which will include very shortly like a communications kit that has images and like Instagram images and Facebook messages and all sorts of different social media responses, as well as some blurbs that you can include in like an e-newsletter or things like that. So those will be coming your way. Along with that, there are all sorts of other resources around integrating the Season of Creation into what your faith community is already doing, whether that be through liturgical resources or prayer services or into meetings, things like that. And you'll see as you go to this that there's all sorts of different Christian denominations have resources shared here. As you click on the Catholic page, then it brings you to this one to talk about what are the Catholic resources we have. On this message for Pope Francis for the Day of Creation in 2023, he said, "In the Season of Creation, as followers of Christ on our shared synodal journey, let us live, work, and pray that our common home will teem with life once again." What a beautiful image to think about it, teeming with life, and that is the hope that we are called to live into in the face of the fear, anxiety, distress that is so urgently placing itself upon us in a continual way. One of the really beautiful resources that just got finished and just got compiled, so it's like hot off the presses, just now online, is this Let Justice and Peace Flow, a Catholic Liturgical Guide. And this was created with Marie Dennis from Pax Christi and Father Jim Hugg and a whole host of other, the Columbans, a whole host of other people who have been who've been working through the Sunday Mass readings and otherwise to think about how to really integrate the season of creation into this, as well as into the liturgical celebrational ways, like not just through the reflections, but also through the ways that we celebrate our liturgy. This has integrated nonviolence into the whole process because, as we mentioned, this conversion of heart is essential as we move forward. It's how we operate on this earth. And so that was part of the reason for Pax Christi to come together in the creation of this resource, because we have to integrate and root ourselves in this process. More and more people are seeing and understanding that our relationship with the earth has been a violent one. And so we have to work to reimagine what that means. We have to work to reimagine how can our relationship with our earth be one that is in right relationship rather than a violent one. In the United States, we recognize that there sometimes feel like there's about 1 million different resources that might come flowing your way, and that can get a little overwhelming for people at times. And so for a small group or personal reflection process, the Catholic Climate Covenant, Laudato Si Movement, the Ignatian Solidarity Network, and Pax Christi came together to create a united resource for the season of creation, so that you don't have one coming at you from each organization and that you have to discern which one to use. So the one before, I recognize, like I said that, then I'm throwing all these resources at you. These ones are the global resources. So the global Catholic resources, these are for specifically integrating the season of creation into your liturgical celebrations. And then this one is for small group and individual reflection. So you could hold it at community meetings, you could hold it at gatherings, you can hold it for yourself as you go and take a daily walk or something like that. And so it's this idea around how are we living the season of creation nonviolently? And together, each organization has developed one of the weekly resources that has prayer, reflects on the scripture for the week, has a 5 to 7 minute video recording that you can listen to and watch and hear, like, how is this broken open from the perspective of Pax Christi and thinking about what we're called to, as well as some reflection questions. And each of these are rooted in the 4 calls to the vow of nonviolence, the vow of nonviolence from Pax Christi International, and the 4 tenets that you commit to by taking the vow. And so one of the invitations at the end is to take the vow of nonviolence with a particular lens towards how are we living nonviolently towards creation? How are we committed to this spiritual conversion, this ecological conversion that is needed for us to move forward? And then the global call to action that we would invite you to participate in, to consider how your congregation or otherwise might participate in, is to use this time also to put pressure and to invite our elected officials to a greater sense of structural change, to live into this better sense of living nonviolently towards our relationship with creation. And so what we're asking globally is that Christians around the world organize a prayer service in an ecologically impacted place around you. So I live in Seattle. We're working on organizing a prayer service in the land that is a forest fire, where there was a forest fire, so it's burned down trees. This could also, quite honestly, be on, at your mother house or at another place, because where is their ecological impact? Everywhere at this point. There is not a place that has not been impacted by the ecological crisis. And so even if it's naming that there's heat, or that normally you would have corn growing at this time, but the corn has grown at a different time because of the ecological impact, or anything along those lines, to hold a prayer service in that space, take a picture of it, and then post it to social media. All of my communications friends on this call, post it to social media and tag John Kerry, who's our representative to the COP, and President Biden, asking for strong action at COP28 and to stop fossil fuel expansion, and to let them know we are #praying for you. And that's the hashtag that we're trying to really build momentum around. As we know, we have a strong sense, especially being Catholics, with President Biden being a Catholic and John Kerry being also rooted in a Catholic faith, to say we have this commonality, and to say, we are in this prayer service. We are praying for you to be bold, to take the action that our world so urgently needs, that God is asking us to do. So I'd invite you to take just a second now to think about where might be a place for your community that you could hold this prayer service. What might be a place that you would do that? And if you're willing to share that idea with people in the chat, it might help spark new ideas for those around you. Oh, and thank you, Brian. Yes, COP28. I should probably explain that, not just use acronyms. So every year there is a climate COP, which is short for Conference of Parties, where government delegations come from all of the UN countries to talk about what they're going to commit to for climate as we move forward. And so this has taken all sorts of things. Perhaps one of the most famous ones was the Paris Accords in 2015. And so upcoming at this one is a really important one for talking about fossil fuel expansion. I'm seeing Stacy's chapel overlooks a beautiful pond and campus. Ooh, that sounds like an amazing place for a prayer service. A native garden, Kathy, that sounds fantastic. What a powerful image that would be. Our sunsets are hazy due to smoke fire, so a prayer service at sunset would be powerful. Ooh, I love that powerful imaging. Look at all of you thinking of really beautiful images to help set this call to action in such a profound way. Our woods and prairie. The bluffs of the Mississippi River. Ooh, man, I am excited to see all these pictures. They sound really beautiful. Our Knights of Columbus Chapel was filled. Oh, I hope that's what KFC stands for. I guess I don't know. Our KFC Chapel hall was filled with 4 feet of water yesterday. Oh my gosh, Kenneth, I'm so sorry to hear that. Our hall was profoundly damaged. Sounds like a super powerful place to hold a prayer reflection. To help President Biden know that his and John Kerry know that their actions at this COP have a direct impact on your local place. These are wonderful ideas. Look at this, farm fields on our campus. And I invite you to take a minute now to think to, who would you ask? Who do you need to talk to make this happen? Is it maybe if your coordinator of Justice and Peace is not sitting next to you, maybe it's your JPIC coordinator. If it's another person who's maybe your ground staff in a certain place, our liturgy team, yes. Absolutely. Who else needs to be at the table for planning this event? Our local minister. Love the note. Thanks, Anne. That's super helpful. Because this is a collective thing, right? So much of the messaging around our ecological impact and the crisis in front of us is that we have to make the change ourselves. Which we do, but why do we have to do it alone? We were sent out in pairs. That's how the gospel, the gospel calls us to. So we're called to work together with people. And when we invite other people into co-planning it with us, all of a sudden this starts to matter a little bit more to them too, which I think is so important. A member of our leadership team. I love that, Mary. I'll give just another couple seconds to think about who you would need to reach out to make this happen. Oh, the new Archbishop, I love it. Spirituality Center, Laudato Si directors, City Park Manager. Look at these ideas coming in. Climate Political Action Group, Sustainability Committee for the city. Oh, those would be so great to bring in, right? This is powerful, and thinking about the ability to use this key moment in our time to mobilize people, to bring people together under this hopelessness that, quite honestly, many people are feeling. There has been this language that has been shared that says like this is a politicized issue. And it's just so interesting because working for a global organization, and I know that many of your congregations are also global, it's not political in the Philippines. They're all living through it. They're saying this is the reality that we're in front of. You know, it's not political in East Africa where they're suffering with drought conditions when they're usually able to have abundance of growing life for their food. And so thinking about how are we called to say we can come together under this umbrella of faith to say we're called to do something to face and respond to this crisis of our day. Look at these beautiful groups that are coming together. I can't wait to hear all about it. And then lastly, I'm wondering how you would share these images. Where would you push them out? Where would you, like social media, how would you invite people ahead of time and then think about pushing it out? So you don't need to put it in the chat, but maybe to make a note to say like, make a plan to think about how to invite people to come and then how to amplify the message that you're doing. And using that hashtag will help. And we are going to collate those into a beautiful image. I forget the word of the image right now, where you like bring all the pictures together to make a big picture that we'll share also at the COP. Collage, thank you, words, yes. Wonderful, well, thank you for doing that little thought experiment brainstorming with me. Oh yes, and I wanted to share this resource as well. On the Season of Creation website, if you scroll down, there's the Season of Creation social media community. And on this, you'll start to see images that are coming up that people are making, messages that people are making that you can take and adapt, you can retweet, you can reshare, whatever needs to happen, but to help you in this. So if you're ever feeling alone in this, reach out, because there's so many people who are working on this and so many people who are working on making graphics and making messaging and for you to take and adapt and put to work in the space. So I'm going to invite you just for a moment to think about, we're going to go back to this image of the graphic, because I think this talks about, you know, which sort of life are we choosing at this point. This is a spiritual issue, as we said, and I was thinking about how to talk about this on this webinar. And on Monday of this week, I was on a Zoom call with a 16-year-old that I was talking to, who is in Indiana, rural Indiana, and she became a Laudato Si animator, which is one of our programs. You can go through a certification process to become a Laudato Si animator. And for her capstone project to live Laudato Si in her local space, she decided to remove the algae from a pond that was just up the hill from where her family lives. And she did this beautiful project of measuring pH levels in the pond and trying to figure out how to remove the algal bloom and create a space that can have good oxygenation for the fish that live underneath. And so this she did a few months ago. And then when I spoke to her on Monday, she said, just yesterday, we caught our first fish, which I just think is really powerful too. And so to think about the impact that can happen through this step-by-steps of like diving deep into one place and one thing and thinking about this. And she said, so much has been done to disempower us. We have all been told that nothing we do is ever enough, that the problem is too big, right? This is like the feelings that we have evoked among us, like when we think about the ginormity of the wildfires and the heat waves and everything like that. So much has been done to disempower us. She said, but we cannot believe that. If we believe that, then we've lost. The 16-year-old, like doing amazing work, right? So thinking about, we have been so disempowered, we can be caught up in this fear and anxiety and frustration and anger. But how do we dive deep into one place and get to know it and to say, I will do what I can with the time I have, with the space and ability that God has given me to make an impact in this place, and then share that good news to help inspire others, to be that puzzle piece. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks to this exactly. He says, the urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change. So thinking about how are we each as our own family member that we are called to act. And so as we know, this is essential for the action. And I thought something interesting that would be helpful to share on this is a communications issue. And I imagine all of you here who are communicators are thinking about that already. You're like, duh, Anna, of course I know that. But I wanted to let you know that Laudato Si Movement sits on the dicastery for communications at the Vatican, which I just think is really interesting. It's not necessarily in another area that you might anticipate, but for communications, because it's essential how we communicate about this and also how we're integrating care of creation into our communications about everything else. Because again, this is the challenge of our times. This is the thing in front of us that, and of course, all social justice issues, all issues that our communities are facing are so intricately interconnected. And so thinking about how are we sharing this in an integrated way and talking about this. And thinking again about emotions, right? And thinking about how we are emotionally called to this. So I am going to take a moment now to share a Mentimeter. I'm not sure how many of you have done a Mentimeter before, so I'm going to take a moment to explain it. Here is the link. And so if you can click on that link in your chat box that has just come up, you should be brought to a page that asks the question, what are your hopes for the season of creation? How might you communicate that? And I invite you to take a moment now to really think about this. What emotions do you want to elicit? What are your hopes that you could have for this month, slightly longer than a month, where 2.2 billion Christians are organizing around this, including your community? What are your hopes for your community? What are your hopes in this? And so I invite you to go ahead and fill it out. So if you click that link, it should bring up a question box and you can write in your answer. And then when you hit submit, it should send a response my way. And I see I already have 3 responses, so people are filling it out. And if you have any questions about how it works, I know tech can be challenging at times, so drop a question into the chat and we can help you troubleshoot. I'll give just another few seconds for a few more answers to start coming in. And as you feel free to continue to answer these questions online. And welcome, Marie. It's so great to have you here. I will stop sharing for a second here and let you know that Marie Dennis is here with us as well from Pax Christi International. So grateful to have you add into this. And so not to put you urgently on the spot, Marie, but if you'd like to just share for a moment, like, you know, as we talked about the season of creation and what the call to nonviolence has to do around this, like what inspired you to say yes? Why'd you want to collaborate?
My apologies. I got the time frame wrong for the webinar, and I don't know how I did that, but I'm so sorry. My apologies. And I am so grateful to be part for Pax Christi and our commitment to nonviolence through the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative to be part of this effort. We believe very much that ecological conversion, which entails a loving awareness that we're not disconnected from the rest of the creation, and commitment to restoring relationships with creation, that we believe that it is intrinsically interconnected with nonviolence, which is all about our relationships with other humans and with the rest of creation. So we are very grateful for this and have been very grateful to be part of the preparation of the Catholic resource, liturgical resource for the season of creation, and to weave into that those reflections an understanding of nonviolence, as well as our concern for the care for creation. So my apologies again for being so late and just had the wrong hour.
It's part of the challenge of living online, right?
It
We're
is.
connected across. Totally makes sense. We're so glad you're here now. And thank you, Maria. I think it's exactly true. Like, we've been talking about how this is a spiritual crisis, and that it requires this call to conversion, to being nonviolently engaged. So we've invited people to share about what their hopes are for the season of creation and how might we communicate that. And so if you're willing to read a couple,
Yes.
Marie.
So that it will be circulated worldwide. May our hearts be touched, that we can keep people engaged in some simple ways during the month. Love of all creation, feelings of hope and empowerment, communicate through the words of sisters, liturgy, social media, email, press connections. I hope more people begin to understand that this is a serious issue affecting future generations. Start with small changes, they make a big difference. Knowledge sharing to save the earth, help the younger generation know there's hope. I know my kids feel hopeless with all of the ecology issues. Encourage people not to give up because the problem is overwhelming. To engage the sisters and their staff in thoughtful prayer for creation, empowering them to do whatever they can to make a difference. Awareness. So many people are not aware of the threats to our planet and need to be educated. Awareness is the first building block to action. I'd like to see us look more closely at the needs in our backyard, in our neighborhood, in our river watersheds, in the Great Lakes region, that we become more aware of the impacts and move together. We are not alone. Remind people that we can do this. I think back to the beginning of the pandemic when our waters became cleaner, more birds came back, fewer cars were on the road. We must commit to doing it. I'm hoping to bring more awareness to the general public by way of social media, newsletter, and so on, that our sisters, associates, and employees feel a deeper connection to our common home, whatever that looks like. I hope that our congregation is a living example of how change can be made personally, faithfully, and communally. My hope is to move 4% of our congregation to make one adjustment to live in a more green fashion, communicate it through our blog, a prayer service with our priest from Uganda in our Knights of Columbus Hall to pray for change and how we live to be good stewards of our common home. I hope that all who come in contact with the season of creation can find something new to try and then share with others. My hope is that our community of sisters could find 1 or 2 projects to do as a group and share that story with the community to challenge others to do the same. Hopes that this season will make a difference. It is up to my congregation if and how they want to or can make a difference, and then I will communicate that on our usual channels. Wonderful.
So powerful. I love all of these ideas, and I know they continue to come in. After this is over, we'll share a PDF of all these answers too, so you can be inspired by other people as well. If you hit refresh on your page, so on the page that has your Mentimeter on it, on that link, if you go up to the top and hit that little circle that's got the arrow, that means refresh, then you should have a new question come up for you. And that new question is, what fears do you have around communicating around the season of creation? Like we talked about, this conversion of heart, it's important to talk about fears, right? And to share about that. So we invite you to share if there's anything that you're nervous about. And as these answers are coming in, I'll go ahead and screen share again so you can start to see some of the answers.
So what fears do you have around communicating about the season of creation? That we will not take it seriously enough, that divisive politics will get in the way, anger from those who still believe global warming and climate change are a hoax. No fears, only excitement. It will only be heard by other Catholics, the choir, and the greater media will pay it no mind. Lack of time, sense that people will be unresponsive to communication. Apathy or low response. It's so big and we are already too late. I fear the more people won't get the message and continue to stay still and without movement. Making sure that we communicate in a way that is accessible to and understandable by everyone. People won't listen or change their lifelong habits and beliefs, that people will feel overwhelmed and not change. I fear that the passion to act will diminish for some people with time. I fear that those who can continue to live without care. I wonder if people understand what a tremendous problem this is for humankind.
Thanks for reading those, Marie. Again, we're staying attentive to our emotions and the emotions that may arise as we hear these, right? And these are real fears because perhaps it comes from experience or from seeing other people walk through similar things. And so the opportunity we have now is to think about these fears and think about how will we be responsive to them? How will we set ourselves up for success? How will we, as someone shared in the original feelings, how will we be motivated to say, okay, this is what we're up against. Acknowledge that, acknowledge the size of Goliath as we're David, but to say that doesn't mean that we're doomed. And how can I, that's a very violent reference, non-violently pull back a stone. That's not what we're going for. But to say, how can I respond with a way that will make an impact in the enormity of the size that is in front of us, with the people that I have the access to, with the powers that I have been given, with the skill sets that I have been given. How is my call to respond? And so our next question, just that we would invite you to think about, and we know that a couple of you are in a room together with each other, is to think about what great ideas do you have for how to implement this? How might you implement this as you think about this, and how might you plan for the season of creation? So I'll put that question up here and just invite you to talk about it with yourself, if you're by yourself in the room, or with the other people in the room with you as you move. We'll play a little bit of bird music to inspire you. And hopefully that has been just enough time to whet your appetite to continue to think about how great these ideas will be. If you have ideas that you're willing to share in the chat in the next minute, we invite you to do that. I want to respond to a question that came through the chat as well, really quickly, around sharing name and data collectively. That is a great question. So yes, Laudato Si Movement is hoping that if you were to, there's a couple of different ways that we might use your name and data. So one is if you want to share a public event that you want other people to come to, that we would be able to share whatever you're willing to share. So contact information if somebody came across your event on the map or something and says, I want to participate. I'm also in Akron, Ohio, and I want to go, that they could know who to contact, or at least the location information where to go and at what time. And then the other opportunity or option is to say, if there was interest in creating sort of a communal response. For instance, I know in the Archdiocese of Houston, there is an engagement where many congregations and parishes that are in Houston are trying to work together for a common archdiocesan season of creation impact. And so many of the parishes are showing the letter film, and then they're coming together for a season of creation mass at the end. And so if there's a hope for a unitive sort of process to move through, that it will be shared that way. Don't worry, we're not going to be sharing it with any other mailing lists or selling it or anything like that. It would just be for one of those two things. I hope that is helpful. And I think now, Dusty, you might have a couple of announcements to move through.
I do. We did have one other question about animator training, if there's another one coming up.
Yes, thank you. So yes, the Laudato Si animators training, the certification process that you can go through. The next one will be in October, and it's a program that is not quite up on our website yet, but it will be very soon. And I will share the link where it will be listed very soon with Dusty to send out in the follow-up email as well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So the only other announcements that I have are just to say thank you to both of you, Anna and Marie, for being here. For those in attendance, please note that a survey will be following as usual, and providing that feedback to our presenters for future presentations that they may give. So your feedback is very much welcome and appreciated. The recording from this will be available on the CWR website, so you'll receive a link to that as well. And if you are interested in reaching out to our presenters, they are both happy to connect with you. You will receive their communication information in the follow-up email that Brian sends out as well. We do have upcoming workshops in October for future CWR workshops, so post-season of creation, but they all take place in St. Louis because it will be our annual conference. So we hope you'll join us there for the annual conference. If you haven't registered yet, now is the perfect time to do that. And with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Marie, who will wrap up for the day.
Yes, we close with a quote from Laudato Si and a brief prayer and question. Anyone who has grown up in the hills, or used to sit by the spring to drink, or played outdoors in the neighborhood square, going back to these places is a chance to recover something of their true selves. From Laudato Si 84. Take a moment to imagine yourself back in this place, in the outdoors you sat in as a child. What do you hear? What do you smell or see, feel or taste? How might you use this feeling of empowerment of a child in creation to help engage and mobilize people during the season of creation? Thank you very much for being part of this wonderful introduction to the season of creation. It was lovely to be part of it.
Thank you all. I believe that is the end of our webinar. We appreciate your spending your time with us today.
Thank you all very much. And many blessings on your season of creation events. We can't wait to watch them as they unfold.